Why did people fall for an outlandish Charlie Kirk theory? The theory being that his shooter was a groyper. In today's video, we're going to talk about that. I have with me the Anthony Rispo, and we're going to talk about all the narratives and all the points that the media has pushed out, and the reasoning behind why people went to that theory first. It's going to be an interesting topic when it comes to political extremism and political violence and how it's on the rise. And it's going to be kind of a two-parter because there's two parts to this article that we're going to, in this subject we're going to talk about. So if you're interested in the second part of the video, make sure you follow me for that. So make sure you guys like this video for the algorithm. It helps out greatly. And if you're not yet subscribed, please subscribe to this channel. We're going to get right into it because it's been a couple weeks since the murder of Charlie Kirk. And I remember within days, that same weekend, I saw people on social media posting that Charlie Kirk's shooter was a groyper, was right wing. If you remember, the Jimmy Kimmel situation was in reference to this. Jimmy Kimmel made the claim that the shooter was, quote, one of them, was a MAGA supporter. And I think there is, let's say, deep history into why these claims are kind of made. And we're going to go a little bit into that. One of them right here, the Times put out 6 days after Charlie's death. Trump called for a crackdown on the radical left, but right-wing extremists are responsible for more political violence. And I think that is an interesting claim. Right-wing extremists are responsible for more political violence. And that is a narrative that has long since been pushed out for a long time. What do you think, Anthony?
Yeah, it sort of collapses the entire argument to something simplistic. It's like one of those things where you could have two things be true at once, but the second part of the claim is to some degree irrelevant because, over the arc of time, you could see right-wing extremism has more volume, I guess, and representation, but that doesn't mean that right now in this moment we're not seeing the left becoming more radical in their behavior. So when I saw that, that's exactly what I felt. I said, this is sort of this doesn't make sense. It's trying to collapse an argument or evade responsibility. That was my gut feeling and instinct. I knew that something was going to come out about this and it was going to develop into like this huge, story to deflect.
Yeah, and so what's interesting is about this specific article that The Atlantic put out. It goes on to say, and I'm gonna read the first two paragraphs because it's significant. It says, yesterday a court filing refuted a theory popular on the left that the suspect in the murder of the conservative activist Charlie Kirk was a right-winger. I had enough of his hatred, the suspect Tyler Robinson wrote in a text message to his romantic partner, according to a transcript of their exchange released by the prosecutors. Some hate can't be negotiated out. An assassin to the right of Kirk, irritated by Kirk's moderation, would have criticized him for being insufficiently hateful. The other charging documents describe Robinson's recent drift to the political left, Robinson's romance with a trans person, and decision to kill Kirk just as he was speaking about transgender mass shootings, strongly suggest that the alleged killer felt special zeal for the cause of trans rights, which is itself closely identified with the left. So we kind of knew this. This information came out like the Sunday of. But even then, it says the evidence that Robinson was a groyper, a member of an online further right than thou movement that had harassed Kirk and President Trump was paltry. And we know that Monday night is when Jimmy Kimmel said the shooter was one of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a few things. This is totally interesting. This is attribution error at its finest. I mean, it's also just this. It's a shortcut way of dealing with the reality, which is an unfortunate one for the political left, is to actually face the demons in its closet, which it seems to have. And I say it, and I want to just really clarify for people. I know people don't like the broad generalizations, but we have to anchor ourselves to the reality that there is something called the left and there's something called the right, and their dispositions are different in terms of how they think about the world. And so I'm just going to leave it there. And there's a lot of variation within those two, but the left, the right. So that's what I'm going to use from now on. The left has a hard time facing its demons. And there's two things about this. What they did with Tyler Robinson by immediately calling him a groyper. This is an attribution error based on the fact that he came from a conservative family, which again is collapsed thinking. It's very simplistic. It's a quick way to have a moment to validate your biases. And the difference between what they did and what those of us who saw this for what it was right away, based on the trans lover and the bullets, and this is sort of really Occam's razor. It's a law of parsimony. The simplest explanation here is that you put all the things together that we've been observing, and you come up with the most simple but kind of honest take of what could be the case. And it's based on converging evidence that's pretty solid. And the thing is that the left, they haven't really bore witness to it. They haven't really had this moment of realization that these are issues actually. And so they couldn't see the constituent parts, the constellation. Either that, or they just are completely ignoring it. But many of us saw it right away, and we said, no, that's a left-wing extremist. And sure enough, that's the case. Now, someone might say, well, you're judging too quickly on your end, and you're judging too quickly on your end. No, they're distinct. They're very different ways of judging. One is going on really no information and kind of just the heat of the moment, which is what the political left did, and the commentators on that side did. And they did, they doubled down, like Jimmy Kimmel. Motivated reasoning, this is just a way to confirm bias. And but folks who saw it for what it was, they just put together true bits of reality and said, this makes sense. So I mean, that's how I feel about that. What do you?
Yeah, I mean, so this guy in the article kind of hammers down the point that we're making. And I want to read it real quick. He says, why did anyone believe that idea to begin with? And I think that's an important question. It's like, why did anyone believe that to begin with? Or even so, why did people assume that to begin with? Like, why was that led? And he says, already it bore the marks of an incipient conspiracy theory, a soothing nugget of esoteric knowledge suppressed for political purposes. Many of those suckered in were victims of their own motivated reasoning. It hurts to admit that a movement you like has produced a bad person. So like you were saying, it's like the left has a hard time looking at the demons in their closet. And it hurts even more to admit that bitter truth to a gloating member of a movement you hate. But there is another reason this theory, which would have absolved the left completely, was so enticing. Lethal left-wing political violence in America has been a relative rarity, and the last time it was commonplace was when most Americans living today were not yet born. Seeing a real left-wing American killer motivated by ideology is like seeing a passenger pigeon or a saber-toothed tiger. So a lot of the points I kind of took from this and is that we live in these kind of like time pockets, right? Because he's making the claim that a lot of the time when left-wing violence was even more so commonplace, and you see how many new people are involved in politics, it was before a time they were even born. So what they're seeing isn't necessarily reality, it's just a perception. I mean, I personally think it's more than this. I think it's also a claim perpetuated by the media narratives that's constantly put out that we've seen in the past 10 years, that Trump is a fascist, conservatives are evil, they're Christian nationalists who want to take away people's rights, they hate women, don't want women to have health care, don't want women to have rights, Trump is a Nazi, like constantly creating a perception of evil on the right. So when they see something evil happen, they're like, well, it couldn't possibly have been us. That's not a reality in itself. I want to play, in regards to the media putting stuff out, I want to play this clip of Jamel Hill, who was one of the proponents in the media who put out this claim.
I do want to play Jamel Hill, speaking of so-called journalists who have it all wrong. Here's this jerk, Stop 15.
Of course, as you all know, in the wake of Charlie's murder, there was an incredible amount of angry discourse from the right, blaming the Democrats, blaming liberals, saying, you're the reason this happened. Only to find out, surprise, 22-year-old white dude, loved guns, raised by two parents, lived in a good home. Dad is a minister, also a sheriff. Didn't check any of them boxes y'all thought he would check, did he?
It's weird how she lost the points about him being a furry, loving, trans dating. I don't even know what this guy's fetishes were, but leftist ideology infected guy who wrote on his bullets anti-fascist catch and notices bulges OXO, etc. Didn't make her little monologue.
So I think what's happening with when you look at the left and the right is that the left identifies evil a lot by identity. So like skin color, sexuality, those kind of arbitrary features, where the right identifies evil by like ideologies. Like you're not evil because you're black or because you're white. You're evil because you believe in Marxism. Like Marxism is evil. And obviously I don't think people on the right are perfect. I don't think that they're necessarily doing it better. I'm just saying that there is a clear difference that, and Jemele Hill, ironically, it's like, you're kind of making a point. It's like, oh, it couldn't have been a black person because he was raised in a nice home, two parents, owns guns. Like you're naming all this stuff. It's like, what are you talking about? Like liberals have guns. Black people like guns. Like you're identifying whether the person was one of them or one of us based off of skin color, which I think is deeply flawed.
Well, it's intersectionality. I mean, it's the ideology is so diffuse. It's so spread apart. There's an identity in it. They're so focused on identity, in a way that almost mimics how someone with a psychological disorder, struggles with their identity. There's no centrality. There's no sense of self. There's no center. And then that when you have a healthy center, and I'm not trying to be fluffy here, what I'm really saying is when you have an ego, and not the kind of ego that's like popular, like, show off type of person, but like when you have a good sense of yourself, you can stand to have different parts of you that are different and that make you who you are. But there's something in the clinical psychology world or clinical psychoanalysis where this idea of identity diffusion, which is when the person doesn't have a good sense of self. And the political left for a long time, like I mentioned at the beginning of this, what my interests were psychologically a few years ago, was on the clinical side of things. I noticed that a lot of people like Jemele, like she's talking about identity, like it's so fragmented, and it's so stark and it's so pointed in a direction where it's like, basically, if you're black, if you're gay, if you're this, if you're that, then therefore. And it's just a fragmented way of looking at the world, at yourself, and you don't get to actually enjoy the nuance of a person, of a situation. And that's what I think is going on there. It's just easier to collapse people to their constituent categories, and then pick and choose which one you want to single out and talk about. Whereas people who have a more coherent sense of self, they're able to maintain that centrality of who they are and then deal with like an aspect of themselves without falling apart. So that's what I think is happening there, and what's been happening with a lot of people on the left. That's a lot in one breath, but
no, it's perfect. And then you have Obama, who kind of saying the same things, right? When he talked about Charlie. Let's listen.
I think those ideas were wrong. Who we are as a country and what direction we should go. And that's a mistake as well. And so, look, obviously I didn't know Charlie Kirk. I was generally aware of some of his ideas. I think those ideas were wrong. But that doesn't negate the fact that what happened was a tragedy and that I mourn for him and his family. He's a young man with two small children and a wife who obviously, and a huge number of friends and supporters who cared about him. And so we have to extend grace to people during their period of mourning and shock. We can also, at the same time, say that I disagree with the idea that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was a mistake. That's not me politicizing the issue. It's making an observation about who are we as a country. I can say that I disagree with the suggestion that my wife or Justice Jackson does not have adequate brain processing power.
So I find this one interesting because, and I think one of the point is like, well, why did people think the shooter couldn't have been one of us, and one of us meaning left wing? And it's this idea when you attribute your beliefs, like you are the righteous ones. It is not possible for us on the left to be the evil ones. Because Charlie Kirk he doesn't believe black women have brain processing powers, which it's not true. It's not, gross negligence of, contextualizing his points, right?
And the civil rights point was one of them. He completely took that out of context.
Yeah. So you have these individuals who are taking realities and warping them and then creating perceptions that people believe in. And I mean, after Charlie's assassination, people were just like, oh, he put a lot of negative energy out there and he said a lot of bad things and he's racist, yada yada. And I told this one individual who DM'd me, I was like, to you, that's your perception. Doesn't mean that's a reality. It's your perception. And
right.
When you have people like Jamel Hill and now Barack Obama pushing out these things, it's like, it's not true. It's like you're taking something, first of all, very highly sensitive, deep political subjects, and then you're like boiling it down to like something so minute that it doesn't even make sense in the way that you articulated it.
Right. Yeah. And I just want to go back, like I was talking about identity and how people are fragmented. I just want to back up a little back and correct something. It's not that everybody who thinks that, like, I mean, clearly Obama is, and Jamel too. I mean, like, I'm not saying that people who think like this are pathological, but I'm because clearly you can have someone who's like Obama, who's like really quite with it and smart and all that stuff, but buy into these lies and double down. And maybe it's out of conformity, not to avoid social costs or being vilified, or because I wonder how many of these people actually believe what they're saying. These leaders, these commentators, these politicians, that they're feeding into this idea that Charlie Kirk was a fascist, a Nazi, implicitly too, by continuously, like you're saying, by misleading people into the fallacious claims about his points. I mean, the Civil Rights Act, he never said it was a mistake. I mean, that is such an easy way to reduce something, to flatten something with such complexity. And yeah, people believe that, and they hear that, and they feel that, they rest on that claim, and in their minds, especially if they have that more egalitarian, we're in this together, social justice mindset, where there's no border between anything really, but between the government and the people, that it's all supposed to just work together beautifully and heavenly in this utopia, then they're going to believe that someone that comes in and says, no, this actually was not helpful for this community, and actually keeping people out of the country who are not, who are illegal is actually helpful for the country. They're going to hear that as a blatant harm towards those groups. And one of the things that leftist extremism is really one of the underlying problems that you see in the literature now is that people are attacking ICE facilities and ICE officers and stuff. So there's a lot about this that gets deep into the idea of harming others, and by putting people in ICE facilities, by challenging the Civil Rights Act, you're regressive. It's not like you're challenging basically some of the opportunistic actors from the Civil Rights Act that actually did do harm, and it's not like you're doing that on good faith. No, you're actually just wholesale a bigot and a racist, and you think the whole thing is bad. And so they're going to hear that over and over and over again, and reinforced by someone like Obama, who they love, and Jimmy Kimmel, and these big people that they love, and it just reinforces over and over again. And then the extreme ones in that distribution will then more likely go out and commit acts of violence.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Like we're saying, it's like, why did people think he was a groyper? There's also people who are like trying to, and Spencer Cox, the governor of Utah, was on CNN that Sunday, I think Sunday morning, and was kind of say, hey, like we know enough, like based on the testimony of family members, we have confirmed his ideologies for the most part. It was just interesting because, like I was saying, Jimmy Kimmel the following day on a platform like ABC, which has a strong news platform, puts out information that was contrary to what was already known.
It is, quote, very clear to us and to the investigators that this was a person who was deeply indoctrinated with leftist ideology. Can you elaborate on that and be more specific?
Well, sure. So that information comes from the people around him, from his family members and friends. That's how we got that information. Again, there's so much more that we're learning, and so much more that we will learn. There will be official charges will be filed on Tuesday, and there will be much more evidence and information available then. And again, we're interviewing all kinds of people, everyone that knows him, and trying to learn more about what that motive actually was.
Well, some outlets are reporting that the suspect lived with a transgender partner. Is that accurate? And are investigators looking at this part of his life as a possible motivation?
Yes, definitely. And yes, I can confirm that. I know that has been reported, and that the FBI has confirmed that as well, that the roommate was a romantic partner, a male transitioning to female. I can say that he has been very cooperative. This partner has been incredibly cooperative, had no idea that this was happening, and is working with investigators right now.
And how is that relevant to the investigation when it comes to the motive? Are you learning that?
Sure. Well, yeah, that's what we're trying to figure out right now. Again, it's easy to draw conclusions from that, and so we've got the shell casings, other forensic evidence that is coming in, and trying to piece all of those things together.
You said that the roommate is being very helpful. Has that individual explained to law enforcement what the mindset of the shooter was and whether or not it is connected to his ideology or his situation as transitioning, as you just described?
I'm not sure about that piece right now, Dana.
Okay, so we're not sure if the fact that he was romantically involved, as you say, with his partner who was transitioning is relevant to the motive of the murder based on the investigation.
Well, sure. Again, all of these things we're trying to figure it out. I know everybody wants to know exactly why and point the finger, and I totally get that. I do too. And so I just want to be careful, as I haven't read all of the interview transcripts. And so we'll have to wait and see what comes out.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. We should all be careful. I guess just because that's out there are a lot of people drawing conclusions. And so I'm just trying to get as many facts as we can glean from you, since you have been involved.
I find it interesting that, like, even as a journalist, CNN, it's like you can tell that there's like an adherence. It's like, well, they're trans. Well, we can't like say that he's left wing because he's dating a trans partner, or, even, Spencer Cox is confirming. He's like, we've talked to the family members. The family members have told us he didn't like Charlie Kirk. He was incredibly left-leaning, was going more and more left-leaning. But yet, even still in the media, they're kind of like, whoa, we can't really what relevance is that? Is that relevant at all?
Right, yeah. They try to evade. They're so detached from the problem. Like, the more they do this, the more bait they give to people on the far right, or just generally people even who get very irritated by this. It's just admit that there is a connection, at least on its face, that we've been for how many years have we been told what pronouns to say. And how many years have we been told that gender affirming care is, evidence-based and standard of care? And that now we know all these bombshell reports, scientific reports, and these activists who are detransitioners, everybody telling us this is crazy. This is not, this is actually not the case. There are a lot of people, meaning like it's not inevitable that you feel gender dysphoric, and then you inevitably, the next best thing is to transition. And it's not that this is common knowledge that everybody agrees to already, and now we can move on. That's the problem with the left, is they think that they hold these ideas that they believe are like how do you say, evolved or transcendent or beyond the archaic, and that anybody who doesn't adhere is just way backwards and not evolved enough, or and the thing is, they're dealing with dissonance, a cognitive dissonance of mega proportions, because like I said, WPATH for the transgender treatment has been exposed. Lots of these things have already been put on the table as a problem. And so that's out in the open. It's like not a surprise anymore at this point. So for this guy, Tyler, to become violent, like I said earlier, it's the sort of parsimony, it's Occam's razor, where you just kind of connect the dots that make sense. I mean, his partner is trans. He had anti-fascist sentiments on the bullets, and he hated Charlie Kirk because he said hateful things. And these are not difficult. This doesn't. Yeah. So they really are. I think they just are not. They're, like you said, they're so reluctant to lean into their faction, to the reality of their faction. Yeah, and it drives me nuts.
Yeah, and I think, to kind of drive in the point more, it's like we're creating a bubble of delusion that when it comes to political extremism, it's right wing, that you're going to be hard pressed to find a left wing extremist, no matter how much evidence we can, kind of put out there. And I think for the average sane person that's kind of looking at politics, I don't think that person is making the argument that political extremism only happens on the left or only happens on the right. I think there are people, if you're saying you can agree and see that it's happening on both sides to a degree. But I can see with my eyes that there is a concerted effort to make it seem as if, hey guys, there's both sides, but it's the right wingers. It's the right wingers. The left wing people, we're not really doing it.
There's actually a history to this, and I'll keep it quick because I don't want to. Yeah, there's actually a through line to this. There's people could look it up. Like I said, I'll keep it short, the abbreviated version. In the 1950s, a German intellectual by the name of Theodor Adorno, he was also a cultural critic, but he, apart from being a cultural critic, he also came up with this idea of the authoritarian personality. He wrote a book about it, and he came up with a scale. He left Nazi Germany, and he came to the States, and he was gung-ho at trying to figure out what comprises fascism. Like, what is it about? How do you explain fascism, and can you measure it? So he came up with something called the F scale, which is the fascism scale, and it includes certain category. In it has various elements of conservatism, and that when taken to sort of an extreme could look somewhat fascistic, like an adherence to law and order. He was coming really from a purview of like nationalism, looking at how nationalism, he conflated the two, nationalism and fascism. And people, we all know that Trump is more nationalistic, and he's more about closing the borders and keeping things tight and law and order. And so Adorno thought of these things as fascism, and he tried to measure it. Well, it failed. It was not a good measure of fascism. And then in the 80s, a psychologist came along by the last name of Altemeyer, and he created the right-wing authoritarianism construct, and he tried to measure that. And that was, in terms of measurements in psychology, a better measurement. But the problem with that is that it asks questions like something like, essentially like, I adhere to authority, and I would be okay with someone getting punished for whatever. I don't know. So it's like you're putting two questions together that if you're conservative and you're okay with authority and you actually want authority, you're going to score higher on that question that has the other part, which is like it would be okay with seeing, illegal immigrants getting detained, and so they cram those two questions together, and inevitably someone who's conservative is going to score high on that, and it's going to make them look like authoritarians because they want to, see people get locked up. It's a little bit of a complex thing to explain, but I tried, and I hope people could grasp it. But the point really is that this has been the case in academia for years, and then we only have the left-wing authoritarianism getting studied in 2016. All right, so for years it's always been right-wing authoritarianism. No talk of left-wing extremism in the academy. No talk of it. So I think that explains at least some, perhaps even a large reason why the left, especially academics and in the media, cannot grasp the fact or refuse to grasp the fact that they have a left-wing authoritarianism faction also, because it's been force-fed into their minds through, university, academia, research that, left-wing authoritarianism doesn't exist, but it does. So yeah. I hope that was clear. I tried to make it as clear.
No, that was perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. While talking about Charlie Kirk's assassination, Obama blames Trump for pushing extreme views while saying those extreme views were not in my White House.
We have to recognize that on both sides, undoubtedly there are people who are extremists and who say things that are contrary to what I believe are America's core values. But I will say that those extreme views were not in my White House. I wasn't embracing them. I wasn't empowering them. I wasn't putting the weight of the United States government behind extremist views. And that is when we have the weight of the United States government behind extremist views, we've got a problem.
Yeah, so this is the part I find interesting and kind of piggybacking of what we're talking about is that, again, you'll see this argument made where it's like extremist views exist on both sides. There are extremists and violent people on both sides. But in reality, me, the liberal, me, the Democrat, we don't actually embrace those. We're not actually violent. We're not actually extreme. So it's kind of like you're saying, this little bit of cognitive dissonance. You can't say that there are extremists on your side, but then you don't enable them. You can't, how is it that extremists thrive on your side and yet somehow you've escaped the act of enabling them in any way, in any capacity?
I posted something about this, and the right, when it gets ideologically rigid, will be more blunt. It's more direct, and Trump is not a double speak. Maybe there's something there, but he doesn't have fluff in his rhetoric. He says what he says, and that's it. But the left, and even savvy politicians just generally, but definitely the left over the past decade, they have a hold on language. So when he says that his White House didn't have that in his White House, okay, fine, you didn't have people talking about how much they hated the right overtly, but you institutionalized certain, you institutionalized racism again through DEI programs, and you did other things that, were entirely questionable. What's this back and forth tit for tat? We should be able to call out wherever there's a dissonance or a problem, or something that's causing friction. His White House was responsible for a lot of divisiveness when it came to racial issues, and just generally speaking, he ripped healthcare from under people. Everybody knew that. I mean, there are other things that he did and that White House did that were a problem, and it's not just one thing,
Yeah, it's an extremely obtuse claim to say that your White House did not participate in any kind of like division. You weren't divisive your entire both terms. There was no divisiveness. There was no extreme views. I think you're hard pressed. This person had a very good commentary on what Obama said.
President Obama's remarks.
Yes.
Because I'm seething about this. This is ostensibly like the standard bearer, and he comes out there and he acts like, I'm going to do the unity. I'm going to do the thing, We can both condemn what happened to Charlie in no uncertain terms and say we disagree with him. So then what are the examples that he gives of disagreeing with Charlie? It's so amazing, Emily. They're all about race, and they are all mischaracterizations of what Charlie said, including the fabricated quote that Karen Ataya was fired from the Washington Post for fabricating.
Yeah.
All painting Charlie as a racist, right?
That's a great point.
And then President Obama says, in my day, we didn't demonize the other side. Not only did he actually do it, demonize everybody on the right as clinging to their guns and their Bibles, implying everybody's, backward, Neanderthals, racist, etc. But he did it on that very stage. Like, he literally could not get through the event without demonizing the other side while pretending that his hands are so clean from this. And I just couldn't get over it because the way that the left does it is all in this very highfalutin, like above it all. But they're actually doing the same thing. What you got from every segment of Obama's talk just there is the other side are racists, are bad people, are violent, are vile, and are divisive. When he is like, that is divisive to say it. And he does this every single time he speaks. And it's just such a farce because at the end of the day, the left loves to say Donald Trump is divisive. But what he actually did was he united the very racially diverse working class of this country around the idea that they deserved a fair shot at the American dream. After it had been denied them by successive Democratic presidents and regimes, including President Obama.
What say you?
No, I wouldn't have anything else to add to that, except I think he also said in that same clip, boy, I don't remember it. Something about violent. He equated. So he said something about violence, about violent views or something. I don't know, but it was in that clip, and I don't want to.
Yeah, that's what he said. He said violent, extreme views like the ones Charlie Kirk had with the civil rights movement, and
that's it. That's it. It's a mischaracterization. First of all, it's Machiavellian to the core. It's like he's so suave and he's so articulate and he's so good at showing up as the morally postured, the morally correct one, and he has this kind of way. People say that Trump knows how to talk regular talk, like with people, and he does, but Obama has that same effect when it comes to your kind of upper middle class academics, and it's not entirely clinical, but it's up there with how you would hear people speak who are fairly well educated and who really think that they're all that in a bag of chips and that they've got it all figured out, again, towards progress, where everything to them is progress, even though so many of their ideas are regressive. I digress. But the point I'm making is that just to say, the violent views that Charlie had, that is a signal that paints a signal rhetorically, linguistically, and it's captured in people's minds. It reinforces what they already feel based on what they don't know. They don't know the breadth of Charlie's work, nor do they know how to parse it out and understand it for its complexity. And so here's Obama saying that, affirming my belief that, or confirming my bias that Charlie Kirk is a racist, and oh yeah, by the way, his views are dangerous. So that is divisive right there. That is definitionally divisive. Truly.